Welcome to episode 18 of The Heart Chamber. I am your host, Boots Knighton. And on today's program, I interview Kathy Hoseth. But before we even get to that, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Also, if you like this interview or anything you hear on The Heart Chamber, I sure would appreciate you leaving a review. You can also go to theheartchamberpodcast.com where you can make a donation. You can also leave me a note. I love hearing from my listeners. And if you have a story that you want to share on The Heart Chamber, I'd appreciate hearing from you. You can leave your information on the contact form on the website, or you can leave me a voicemail. But let's not waste any more time. Let's get right to Kathy's interview. I'm so excited to share this with you today, so let's hop to it. Kathy and I became acquainted on the Facebook support group you will hear me reference time and time again on this podcast for myocardial bridging. Kathy was 58 years old when she had unroofing. She is now 62 years old. I am so honored that Kathy has accepted my invitation to come on to this podcast to share her story. Welcome, Kathy.
Well, hi, and thank you for inviting me.
So, Kathy, I am really just anxious to dive into this. I have found that when I talk to fellow heart warriors, it's like a balm to my soul that I didn't realize I needed. I mean, even though I have an amazing support group and I've done incredible work around my own healing, there's just nothing like connecting with a fellow heart warrior, particularly over the exact same surgery I had. So dive in, set the setting for us. You were 58 at the time. Did you have warning signs leading up to
Mm.
your surgery? Help us understand the scene.
Yeah, I did. It got worse as I got older. The truth is I'm probably one of those rare people that felt it even as a child. And just kind of, how you just instinctively know that something isn't quite right. But you go on with life, as we all have. For me, it started at kind of guessed at this age, but I would say even 8. And for me, back in those days, it was a sharp pain in my heart. To my mom, I would say, Mom, I feel like there's a knitting needle. And why I thought of that, I don't know, stabbing me in the heart. She'd look at me very concerned, and then it would go away. We know now what it was that was doing that. My MB, myocardial bridge, was quite deep. And so even in those days, but then that eventually kind of went away. Very active kid, came from a family of 6 kids, all of us about a year apart. And we were just active, always outside doing that kind of thing. And I thought I was tough as nails, but I just really wasn't. One of the other things I had, which may or may not have been, but I always had a lot of aches and pains. My legs hurt all the time as a kid. I would just cry myself to sleep. None of my other siblings had that, and it could have been. They thought maybe it was arthritis. Right, it wasn't that. It wasn't until, skip ahead a little bit. Well, actually, you could, there's so many things that once you know that you go, oh, okay. Trying to do track in junior high, telling my coach, I just can't get enough air in. I wanted to be the best. That's, kind of my personality, just real competitive. I just couldn't do it. And felt, a bit of a failure, but I just couldn't do it. And they, you know what they say, you're not conditioned. I was, I just wasn't, if that makes sense. And then skip ahead, I'd say, how old was I? 25, 26. I went back to school. When I was 25, I had a 2-year-old and I was pregnant with my next. I know, insane. I did it in 4.5 years. And when I transferred to Michigan State, it was a lot. It'd be a lot for anybody. And a lot of, I guess I probably don't need to explain that, but just the stress of it was really tough. Just the physical part of trying to deal with a family and the mental, because there was a lot of studying. And I was a good student, not so much earlier. Anyway, ended up in MSU because of chest pain. And it was so bad, I thought I was having a heart attack. That was one of the first real indicators. And I went in, and the first thing they did was talk to me and listen to my heart. And she asked me about what I was doing. And when I explained to her what I just told you I was doing, she said, "Oh my gosh, honey, it's stress. You need to go home and take a bath and, have a glass of wine." Sounded good. It didn't help. I thought this chest pain that I was feeling was stress. And my life had a lot of stress.
Let me interrupt you. I
And
wanna
speak.
interrupt you because did you keep having that chest pain
Hmm.
intermittently? Okay.
Yeah, it was
And did you take, like, an anxiety medication? Like
no.
no. Okay,
No,
you just dealt with the pain.
I just dealt with the pain. I kind of gutted it out.
Mhm,
Tylenol is kind of what I lived.
mhm.
Yeah, it was bad, and I got so I was laughing about it, and I remember asking my best friend because she was doing the same thing I was doing. I said, "Do you get chest pain?" And she's like, "No," and I'm like, "Okay, I guess it's just me." And then
Did it radiate ever? Like, did it radiate down your arm or in your neck, or was it just, like, a full just chest area?
what I remember is chest. I mean, it could have been, but I
Okay.
wasn't paying close enough attention. And of course, if I rested and things were better, it would be a little less. But raising two little boys and going, yeah, that terrible combination. And then later,
Mhm.
I went back to the doctor, my local doctor, having this side pain that was awful. And we talked about it, listened to my heart, said, "You look really healthy. I really don't want to do anything invasive." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay." He said, "It might be pleurisy." And I'm like, "Well, maybe. I don't know." He said, "That's kind of what it feels like." Lived with that for however many more years. Just thought maybe that was it. Chest pain still. And
For our audience, what is pleurisy?
it is a pain, and I'm trying, I should have looked this up because another one I was diagnosed with was pericarditis, which is inflammation around the sac of your heart. This, I think, is
Mhm, mhm,
lungs, and I could be wrong. I can research that, but that's it's a pain in your side and your upper
mhm.
side, but I think it has more to do with your lungs.
How old were you when you had the pericarditis
Ear-
diagnosis?
Early 50s.
I think back to my own medical gaslighting, and I feel like you're telling my story in a way without me. I don't have kids, but I could not run in high school very well,
Hmm.
did not know why. I'm 5 feet tall, and they put me on the long jump as, like, a participatory, like, athlete because I was so determined to participate, and they were like, "Well, you can't run very fast," and, I just thought I was, like, some little weakling, and, my poor heart, little did I know, was just doing the best it could, and then I actually went to the emergency room several times in my 20s with anxiety symptoms, severe chest pain, and they never found anything.
No.
And they just kept telling me to take anxiety medication.
Okay. See, you're just enough younger where I'd forgotten I had a couple
Mhm,
panic attacks where I actually passed out in line for a movie with a boyfriend. I don't know how old I was, 16 or 17. And, yeah, those panic attacks I think were directly related to it as well. But I forgot,
mhm, mhm.
couldn't stand in line anywhere very long. It would just weird stuff.
Yeah, and that's why all of this backstory is so important because surely we aren't the only 2 that have had this, and,
Mm.
I mean, I don't want people suffering anxiety to quickly run to a cardiologist and be like, "Do I have a myocardial bridge?" Like, I don't wanna ensue unnecessary panic, yet at the same time, I think it's just having the awareness
Mhm.
is so important.
Mhm. I agree. Totally agree.
Mhm. So, what happened next?
Okay, after that, back home to deal with little kids, and by then working full time. Home to raise my two little boys, which were also extremely active kids, and just kind of went on with life. Always chest pain, never really went away. But when it got really bad, was the real bad, which now I know because it was always on my left side. Never, it was always right there. Life goes on. I'm not going to tell you my whole life story, but some other stressors that made the chest pain worse. But I kept going back to, and I'm not one to go to the doctor a lot and when I go, it's because something's wrong. I kept going back to that first diagnosis of, it's just stress, honey, and I wouldn't go to the doctor. What prompted me the next emergency Oh, there was a couple of them. You forget. But one of them, we had my stepdaughter had 2 little boys, which, I was used to, but they had spent a couple of days with us, and by the second morning and they were young, little, I woke up and the back, just everything just hurt so bad, and I'm not one to complain, so I never said a lot, but got up and we made the pancakes because that's what they liked. But by the time it came to clearing the table and doing the dishes, I was having what I thought was a heart attack, and it was a spasm, and that's how I explained it. I said, "Hon, I think I'm having a heart attack. There's something really wrong." And so off we went to the emergency room with the little kids. We get there, they run all kinds of tests. Yeah, she seems okay. I think she's okay. And I kept saying, what was I feeling? That felt like a spasm.
Mhm.
And they just said, well, we're going to have you follow up with a cardiologist, which I did a week or 2 later, my first stress test. And I must have been, maybe I was in my late 40s, actually. Can't remember exactly. I'd have to, anyway. Passed the stress test with flying colors because my lifestyle is we walk daily and a lot. 5 miles, and I'd be walking. This cardiologist went back to see him again. The stress test with flying colors. It was like, "You seem okay." But what he said to me, and he sat down and talked to me for a long time and asked me some questions. And he said, "Did you have pain in the back of your neck?" And I was like, I don't know if I did or not. I can't remember, but I'm having pain here." And he said, "I think it's pericarditis. And that is where the inflammation around the sac of the heart." And he said, "It can cause you a lot of pain." He said, "It can come and go." He
Mhm.
said, "We it's from a virus that you had who knows when." And still, I'm still not putting all of these heart issues together, and, I just didn't put them together. So, a few more years go by with thinking, "It's pericarditis," and what he told me to do, take a ton of Motrin. So, and, Motrin is not good for our heart. So, meanwhile, I'm popping
No,
these
no.
I know, I know,
Oh
it's
my gosh.
and I kept thinking, "It's not going away," and sometimes it was worse than others, which I think most people with this understand, and especially if you
Mhm.
we're doing whatever, it can kind of wax and wane, and it just felt like it was constant. And I thought, God, I should go back and see him, but I didn't. What finally, a couple of things happened. One, the Fitbit became a thing, and my sister and I were doing it. The one a year older than me, because also very competitive. And she was always trying to get me into 5Ks, and she would just leave me in the dust. I mean, I'd finish them, but there was walking because I just couldn't breathe. So we were wearing our Fitbits and comparing, and actually it was her, my sister Colleen, and I'd say, "What's your heart rate?" And she'd be, "Well, I don't know, 110." And I'd be like, "Geez, so Pete, I'm 185." And she's like, "That doesn't sound right." And we started this, yeah, comparison. And then I just started looking into that more and thinking, this isn't right. Back to the local
Mhm.
doc. And I met a woman. God bless her. She saved me. And interesting, her husband ended up having something very similar a year later. Anyway, she said to me, they took my heart rate, and at that time, for some reason, my left arm hurt, and she took and my EKG, she found something on the EKG. She couldn't read it, she didn't know, but she said, "You're tachycardia. Your left
Mhm.
arm hurts. You're going to see a cardiologist." First idiot, I have to say, that I saw. I won't mention his name. He put me on one of those monitors, heart monitor. And what I got was a phone call message that said, "Well, we saw a couple of SVTs, meaning your heart rate spiked a couple times. Nothing to worry about, nothing life threatening." Okay, whatever. And I ended up back to the doc, same thing. Or maybe what I just described was the second one. Anyway, similar circumstances.
Mhm.
There's something isn't right here. I said, "I don't know what it is." My ex-husband, first husband, died at 51 of a heart attack, and my kids were still fairly young. And I said, so there was something about that episode, and it hadn't been that long, that I just said, "I want the works." And I think those are the words I said. I said, "I may
Mhm.
look healthy, but there's my inner voice is telling me there's something not right here. So let's do it." And he hesitated. He didn't want to. So he put me through a battery of tests. An echo didn't show anything, some other ultrasound that didn't pick anything up. And I'm like, "Oh, good grief. I guess it's nothing. It's just me. I'm a hypochondriac." Then I went for a nuclear stress test. That showed something. And what it showed, is yours
Mhm.
similar? Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
they thought I had a blockage. So they got me in right away. Meanwhile, I had a trip to Australia planned and, I don't know how many days. It was soon. So they got
Mhm.
I was scared. I thought, okay, that's it. I've got a blockage. They'll do a stent. We'll get on with life. So he does the calf and he was not good. He actually had me in tears. He was rough. He couldn't do it through the wrist and I had bruises. You should have seen my leg. It was horrible. He was horrible. And he gets
Mhm.
there and
And where was this? Was this in Michigan?
it was in Michigan. It wasn't where I had my heart surgery. It was at
Okay.
there's 2 hospitals, Fred and Lena Meyer Heart Center where I had surgery, and then there's Mercy Health where I had this where my doctor recommended to go. And he's in there doing what he's doing with the wire that isn't this is
Mhm.
serious enough.
Right. And a heart cath is no picnic. I mean, I had 3 in a year and a half, and I swear each of those was harder on me than the actual open heart surgery.
Yeah.
It is not how I wanna spend my time ever again.
No, but he
Mhm.
gets there, and he said, "What?" And he was looked all puzzles, and he's like, "What the heck?" And he says and this is what he's saying to me, and let me back up just a little bit. Another issue that I've had is real low blood pressure, real high heart rate, and
Mhm.
so he was like, "Well, we gotta get your blood pressure up before we can too low." So, that was after I was in there. So, meanwhile, everything wears off, right? And I was like, I can really feel the give you anything right now, your blood pressure's too low. And I'm like, okay, whatever. Just do what you're gonna do. And he says this, and by then, he's at the bridge. I didn't know it, but he's like, "Did you smoke or something?" And I said, "Years ago," and
Mhm.
but I for years. And he goes, "Oh, it's a bridge." And he's all happy about it, stops what he's doing. So he never went all the way through the bridge. He stopped when he finally figured out because he saw such an angle on the artery. And that's another procedure where they use a different wire and go down through the bridge to test the pressure. And I know I'm not going to get all the technology right, but that's how
Mhm.
they really how bad the bridge is. So he just stopped and I thought, "Okay, well, they found something." Comes back in the room afterwards and he's, all happy and he's like, "It's just a bridge, it's nothing." And I'm like, "Really?" And I'd never heard of one. So lo and behold, they put me on a ton of medication, just a ton, which just if you've been through this, I felt horrible
Mhm.
and it did nothing for my symptoms.
Can
So,
you, tell us about the medication that you were on? Which do you remember the
yeah,
medications?
one of them is metropolol that I occasionally
Mhm.
take now, very small. They don't even make the amount that I take. It's so small. I have to break things into quarters, which there's a blocker and oh my gosh, I can't think of the name of it. I'm sorry. But 2 different kinds of block,
That's okay.
and also some
Mhm.
for cholesterol, aspirin, and it seems like there was something else. I mean, I was taking pills all day long, and he wanted me to take them a couple times a day. And I'm like, if this is nothing, why am I being loaded up with all of this medication,
Mhm.
making me feel worse? Anyway, started my research. That was about the time I discovered this group that we are part of.
And Kathy, what age were you then?
I was 58. Once things were correctly diagnosed, they moved quickly. And I'm almost
Okay.
there. So nothing and I went back to him, and that's when I said, "I think I have my timeline a little mixed up." That's when I said to him, "I've done some research. I know that there is surgery. Stanford's doing it out in California. Oh, nobody's gonna do that. Nobody's gonna do surgery for you. It's not gonna happen. It's not a big deal. It's mild." At this point, understand, I didn't know that he hadn't done the proper test once he was, with the heart cath. And I remember this, he was like, "Wow, there's one more what we could do." And I said, "And what's that?" He said, "The heart cath with the wire that goes all the way through and measures." What I know now is he
Mhm.
was not comfortable and he didn't end up doing it. Through the grace of God, the day that I went in to have that done, it was a terrible snowstorm. And he called me early in the morning and said, "Well, we can reschedule this. It's not, a big deal." And I'm like, "No, I'm coming in," because he was there. And he ended up not doing it. There was another woman there that I got lucky. All of my doctors were women that just listened to me, and she took his place. Her name is Karenko. Karenko's her last name. The moment her first name escapes me, and she
Mhm.
told me, she said, "We're going to do this." And she said, "Understand, we don't want you to have surgery if we can avoid it." And I said, "Do you think for 1 minute I want open heart surgery?" I said, "I want to know what I'm dealing."
Yeah.
So she
Yeah.
did it.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, I don't want to be in the dark. I don't want to be gaslighted, whatever. Let's get to the bottom of it.
Yeah.
So before we went in, she's already kind of preparing me. But she was so gentle. She went through my wrist, hardly felt a thing. She was kind, just a beautiful person. Get back out there and I'm thinking again, it's, whatever, a lifetime of pills. She says to me, and she took my hand and she said, "This is very significant, and I'm going to have you see Dr. Liaki. She's a good friend of mine, and she'll take care of you." And it was like, oh my God. Actually, just yesterday, I posted something on our group that I could, because I was doing a little research that I found I hadn't seen before. And it's a visual of what my artery looked like. And it's orange, 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 red, 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 red. And those colors indicate that there wasn't anything getting through there. I mean, there was a little, otherwise I'd be dead.
Wow. Yeah.
But that feeling of, okay, I feel validated. But then came, oh my God, I am open heart surgery, right? So there was that, and I got in to see her. Now I'm even kind of a little shaky just thinking about it. Fairly quickly, and oh, she's brilliant, known for heart transplants. Her bedside manner was terrible, but she was brilliant, and I trusted her, and that's what really
Mhm.
me. There were people on our group that were saying, "Now you need to come out to Stanford. They know what they're doing. They've done this." Her team actually dove in and looked at what Stanford was doing because they hadn't done this. I was the first here. Yeah.
Wow.
And her very first meeting with me and my husband was, "Yeah, it looks like you need surgery." But to be very truthful, for a minute, she kind of backed up and I think she got nervous and didn't I think she wasn't sure she wanted to do it. And she said, "We're gonna send these out to University of Michigan and have them look at your results." And the results came back as she knew. She'd already seen it, but she just wanted more proof, because they have better tests like Stanford. And then we went ahead and did it. Mine wasn't as easy. I was a little older than a lot of you. I still
Mhm.
occasionally will have pain and a high heart, but not like it was, not anything like it was. And when I say back to the sister again, we walk a lot together, and I walk with my husband.
Was the bridge just over your LAD?
Yes, she said it was 2 centimeters long, but it was
Mhm.
4 millimeters deep, which is deep. And I think
That's very deep.
why very deep, and that's why it's so many issues.
Mhm.
And it's my opinion that's why I had, I mean, even with the artery, that it's taken so long to heal with what they call the endothelial dysfunction, and I can feel that. But it was deep, and it was beat on for 58 years. So,
Mhm. Mhm. It takes
yeah.
time, and I think people forget that, and I know I was very guilty of thinking I just could just get right back to my old life, and, it just
Mm-mm.
that's just not in the cards for us. So, Kathy, I'm just sitting with the fact that you were the first person unroofed in your area, and just the magnitude of that. First of all, that had to have taken some courage to be willing to be the first.
Yeah, it did.
And yeah, and, I hear you, traveling to Stanford is really far and expensive, and it is so much better if you can stay near your house, near your family,
Mhm.
likely in network with insurance,
Yep.
all of that, all the above. But what was that like going into that surgery knowing that you were the first?
When it came right down to it, terrifying. It just was. And I actually, one of the feelings I had when I got in there was, oh my God, am I doing the right thing? Should I get up off this table right now? I didn't, obviously. But yeah, my God, it just was because there's so many people around you and you've been all your life told that it's nothing. And like I say, even the surgeon she was brilliant, hesitated for a minute. Her first reaction when she saw what was happening was, "Oh, yeah, we need to fix this." But then kind of backed up, maybe realizing we don't do these. This isn't something we do. When it was all said and done, I said to her, whenever I was conscious. Maybe it was the day or 2 later, I can't remember. I said, "By the way," I said, I can feel the release of pressure." I said, I know I've got a lot of healing to do, but I could feel that right away." And she said, "Good."
I could too in mine.
Isn't that amazing? But you can feel that. She asked me later, and I think I told you this before, to do an article for them, to do an interview, so that other, especially women, because I think that's what, her crusade was, to help young women who are ignored with similar issues. And that's,
Mhm.
hey, I'm 62. For those of you younger coming up behind us, hopefully this makes a difference. I actually did have a person in our group found my story. She's part of our group. I can't remember her name now either. And she started messaging me and she said, "Can I talk to you?" And I referred her to
Mm.
the group and said, "Yeah,
We don't
heard
have
ya.
to do this alone.
No,
Mm-mm.
yeah." I definitely felt like a pioneer. It was another just quick story too. They kept me in the hospital a while because my heart rate kept going over 200. It was really bad. But again, I think it's because it was so deep and they had to cut so far to release it. But anyway, a nurse came in when I was feeling a little better and she said, "Oh my gosh, we were all so excited to be in your surgery." And I looked at her like, "Why?" And she said, "We have never seen a angiogram like yours." She said, "Your artery had a right angle." She said, "It just was amazing to all of us." And she just was so excited to talk to me about it. What I didn't know was that they had two doctors, two surgeons, because their policy is whenever you do something for the first time at that hospital, we have two surgeons.
So now that you're through the surgery and you've had a few years to reflect, how has this changed your life? I mean, obviously, your physical symptoms have dramatically improved.
Yes, they have a lot. Tremendously. I actually feel like a different person, in a lot of ways. Right afterwards, and I don't know if you had this experience, I shouldn't say right afterwards, actually for quite a while, maybe even a year. I was very quiet, just kind of reflecting and just loving the people around me that were there to support me. Just different. Usually my way, I just kind of plow through everything. If I haven't done it before, we'll figure it out on the way. But it has changed me. And I don't know if they did this with you, but they stopped my heart when they did the surgery.
Mhm.
It was something they did
Yeah,
with
they
my
did the same for me.
okay.
Mhm.
I gotta believe that
Mhm.
there's something to that. I don't know what it is. Right after surgery too, I was also, a lot of people go through a depression. I wasn't in a depression. I was elated. I couldn't be happier. I just felt like God smiled at me finally. It's like, good grief, could have figured this out a long time ago. But they didn't.
So you didn't
But
experience any cardiac depression at all?
no, I really didn't. If anything, I was the other
Hmm.
way.
Wow.
Just I know, and I know it's rare because many people go the other way. But at first I sure didn't. Not at all.
Mhm.
Think sometimes maybe the first couple of years I wanted to be farther ahead than I was, and that could be a little discouraging. And it's I guess I've just kind of accepted, which is something I never did well either. But acceptance is a whole new word for me, and that's learning to know your shortcomings and what I can and cannot do. Just taking good care of myself. My diet's changed. My lifestyle has changed. I was never a crazy person, but I drank very little. I'll have a
Mhm.
glass of wine or 2 sometimes with my sister and sometimes with
Mhm.
but it's rare because that still affects
Mhm. With your diet, how did you change your diet?
one of the things that I've always been a sugar hound, still am, and I have to be careful. Cut way back on the sugar. I
Okay.
I will can't be a vegetarian, I just can't do it. I love my veggies and I eat a lot, but I still like a little chicken every now and then, a little steak. I hate
Mhm.
fish, unfortunately. But just clean eating, if you will. Don't do
Mhm.
the diet pop.
Mhm.
Another thing that I do
Mhm.
that coffee. I have it in the morning, and then I have if I do have it later, it's decaf.
Do you notice that if you drink too much caffeine that it affects your heart? Can you feel it?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I just don't. I mean, there's just those little things. It's like, nah, you're not bulletproof. And why do something that
Yeah.
you? So
Right. Yeah, I noticed for me, like, my heart surgery just turned me into a barometer, and I was sensitive before, but now I'm like it's like a million times more sensitive to everything, and I think that I was pretty aware before my surgery, but I really had to hone my awareness even more to make sure I didn't get myself into trouble after surgery. And I think that is a skill that is paramount to healing well, is just
Yeah.
really being in touch with ourselves and our bodies, but our physical body, but also our emotional body and our mental body. And it's not healing a broken bone, and broken bones can be serious, but this is the ultimate surgery, I feel like. And I feel like I wonder if you feel the same, Kathy. I feel like it's such an opportunity to try again at life. Like, it just
Mhm.
has a way of just wiping the slate clean. And, especially for those of us who are put on the heart-lung machine, because like, Stanford does off-pump surgeries, but my surgeon doesn't believe in that. And for me, I had such intensive myocardial bridging on multiple arteries that
That's right.
it was impossible to do it off pump anyway. But yeah, I felt like it was like how, like, sometimes if your iPhone or your computer kinda, like, acts up, you just power it off,
Mhm.
and then you wait a few seconds, and then you power it back on again. Like,
Mm, I
that's what I think you and I went through, right? Like,
yep,
when our heart was put on the heart-lung machine.
yep, yeah, I like it.
Yeah, so you and I are lucky. We got to do a reboot that,
Yeah, yeah,
not that I'm advocating for everyone to go out and get an open heart surgery. Like, there's gotta be easier, softer way.
yes. The whole discussion of whether it's hereditary is interesting to me too. I don't know.
It is, yeah.
I
I think with this myocardial bridge thing, I wonder, Kathy, if it's really just getting going, like, the conversation in the medical community. I think all of us, you are very much a pioneer in your area, but, like, yeah, but for the rest of us, I mean, I think that we're all here to maybe seed that conversation. I don't know, I have to wonder.
yeah, do I feel lucky that I ran into the right people at the right time,
Mhm,
and like I said, how
mhm,
they were all women that listened to me, and, yeah,
yeah,
woman to woman, but yeah, I mean, obviously, there are plenty of good surgeons out there, but I just felt like mine was one of the best, and even though she hadn't done it, I knew she could handle it. So going into that surgery, part of your question, I knew that. I knew that much, that I knew she was a brilliant surgeon and could do it. So, I don't know.
wow.
Yep.
Well, I'm so glad you're still with us, and I'm so glad that you are courageous enough to share. And I think there's such power and healing when we are willing to share our stories and when we're willing to listen to each other's stories.
Mhm.
And I think that's how the world heals.
Absolutely, and I think you're right. This is
Mhm.
beginning to get some attention and research because that's what it needs is a lot of research. When I first joined our group, what was there, like 200, I think, people,
Mhm.
maybe 200 had it done. That's not very many
That's not very many.
new.
No.
So,
And we're over 1,000 people now in our support group, I think.
yep, yep.
So it's pretty amazing. And so, wow. Well, Kathy, thank you for your time today. Is there anything you want our listeners to know? Any words of advice or something that surprised you before we hang up today?
What I would say to anybody, especially women, do not be ignored. If you feel something isn't right, just push. The tests are out there. And if you're lucky enough to have the insurance to do it, you do it and you listen to yourself and contact people who've been through it.
Yeah, and I would echo that a million times. Well, thanks again, Kathy. Kathy Hoseth from Lowell, Michigan, sharing her story of myocardial bridging, being unroofed at age 58 and thriving and living her best life now. And that's our episode for today. Thank you so much for spending a little bit of your day with me. If you enjoyed this podcast, I sure would appreciate if you would go to my website, theheartchamberpodcast.com, and make a donation. Also, if you are a fellow heart warrior, I'd love to hear from you. Would you like to share your story on this podcast? You can either send me an email at boots@theheartchamberpodcast.com, Or you can go to my website and go to the contact link and leave me a message there. There's also a way to leave me a voicemail on my website. I'm so glad you joined me for today. Please be sure to come back next Tuesday to the Heart Chamber podcast for another inspiring episode.